Okay, so welcome everyone to the, in principle, November monthly community call, which has been moved to early December because of the US Thanksgiving. Thanks for being with us today. So as you probably all know, we're going to hear from Romina Colman, who's here, who's the product owner of Open Data Editor. So Open Data Editor is, maybe some of you already know it because we presented it in the past before, in the beta version and even in the alpha version, I think. It's an application, which basically uses frictionless data under the hood. And the idea is to basically give people with little to no technical skills the ability to use not all, of course, of the features that we have in Frictionless, but most of them, to at least check the data sets and be able to spot mistakes and quickly correct them. Anyhow, I won't bore you much with that. Just one little note is that the stable release of the application has happened today, so we're really happy about it. I'll share a few links in the chat as well, so you can have a look at the blog. But Romy is probably the person who needs to speak about this, so Romina, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you, everyone. I think we have the first call with the Frictionless community 8 months ago. Yes, right? To hear what you think about the ODE and also all the work you were doing and from my side, get the chance to know the community. Gargana is here, and I want to mention that also. Gargana was one of the developers working on the Open Data Editor. This is not my work. This is the teamwork. Sarah was also working in the project, Patricio, and a lot of more people. And we talked a lot to people in the open data community for the project. So basically, those people are also responsible for the product that we have right now also. I'll start sharing my screen. I promise it won't be some boring slides, just some images to explain all the work we have done with the Open Data Editor. You can also, whenever you want, to start asking questions about the product, but just to briefly say that it has been a quite interesting journey, because when we started, the OD had a lot of features. We started talking to the community to understand their needs, and we also needed to define what the product would be, at least at the end of December. The other thing that I want to mention is that probably if you download the app, if you find bugs or things that are not working, you can use GitHub to report those issues. But basically, the idea is to continue working on the ODE and getting more feedback in this stable version, also from the open data community and data practitioners, to see what we need to work on and to improve on the tool. Let me share my screen now. Can you see it? Yes, right?
Yes.
Perfect. So when I prepared the slides, I added November 2024, and then today I realized we were in December. But basically, how we started, this is, the old or original look and feel of the Open Data Editor. It has a lot of features. People could use AI, could upload, create articles with artificial intelligence, upload tables, and detect errors in tables. Here are the part of charts. Also, again, the AI, the possibility to work with maps, a lot of things, and also a lot of buttons around the tool. So here are, again, some examples of how what the tool looked like when we started working in March. And before we start writing the first line of code, we started interviews with people. We didn't show the app, and that's something that I wanted to mention, because the idea was to understand what were the common problems that people faced when working with data in general. So the main finding was that everyone were struggling with exploring data sets, tables, and spending a lot of time trying to check the quality of their data and also detecting errors. So basically, everyone mentioned that they couldn't do data analysis. They had to spend almost 70% of the time trying to check the quality of the tables, trying to detect errors, and then analyze to prepare the table to analyze the data. So based on these findings that we found in the user research, we decided to reduce the product, into one main objective. So the idea was to build an app like we did, the Open Data Editor, to give people the possibility to upload tables into the application and the application would detect errors and let them know where were located the errors in those specific tables. So basically, we started removing, for instance, the possibility to upload maps, to write articles with AI and everything, and it just has one functionality right now. So again, this is the definition. The Open Data Editor is a desktop app to help non-technical data practitioners to explore and detect errors in tables. And that is another thing that we found, we think it was key during user research and when building the product. This is an app for non-technical people. And why we define the ODE as such? Basically, because we understand that frictionless is the power behind the tool. But if we give frictionless to non-technical users, it's impossible for them to understand it. So basically, what we are trying to do with the ODE is reduce that friction between the code and the app. And the app does things that people maybe do not understand, but basically applies frictionless in a simple way for non-technical audiences. The main changes we work on from March till December. We changed the upload process. Basically, we had one button in the application and people could upload in one simple click files. But what we did was to separate the workflow. I will show you right now. Now people can upload Excel or CSV files. And that is one of the things we have to define because we during the user research, people mentioned they work with Google Sheets, Excel, and CSV files. And also folders. Of course, for more advanced users, people tend to ingest folders with a lot of files and work with that data. So this is the main screen. People can click on upload your data in two different parts of the screen, here and here. And then you can upload CSV, Excel folders, and also external links. Here, what they can paste are URLs from Google Sheets, public URLs, and also data from GitHub. We know that maybe that is more advanced because, again, we interview data practitioners working in NGOs, in different media organizations, and also people who work on the educational field. And we know that maybe this is more, for instance, Google Sheets more for non-technical users, but sorry, the light, I will turn it off. It's failing. The light in my house, sorry. But we decided to keep the GitHub, the possibility to upload data from GitHub and also links directly to CSVs. Then when someone ingests a table, we added this red dot to indicate if after the process of reading the file, the ODE detects that the file has problems, and a green dot to identify those tables that were read by the ODE but has no problems. And the other thing that we incorporated also was, I mean, in this case, we have two columns, but if the file has a lot of columns, it is difficult for users to understand where the error is located because some rows may seem that has no errors. So one of the things we added also is to use the red background to highlight those rows that are problematic for users. And when we conducted the user research after the pre-release, some people mentioned that for them, the red dot and the green dot was not transparent. So we added a error counter next to the errors button to let the user know how many errors the ODE detected. We also changed, and again, this is work in progress because we plan to work more deep in this part of the screen. This was the most complicated part for most users, the explanation of the errors. But basically here, what we try to do is to show in a more clear way what type of error the table contains, the row number where that error is located whenever users click on errors report, and also highlight the specific part where the error is located. In this case, for the stable release, I don't know if you remember, but the ODE has this part where the application explains with one sentence what type of error the app encountered and also the position of the error. We found it was super difficult for people to understand what was position 3, position 4, etc., because they were used to look at tables and talked about cells using numbers, but also the alphabet. So you know that when we work with Excel and other files, we say, hey, the error is located in A2. So to start talking about position 3 and 4 was super complicated for people to understand. So that's one of the things that we want to work in the future. The idea is, I will talk about this later, but to try to use artificial intelligence to make the errors explanation simpler for users. And then, again, the other feature that we used was this AI integration. We had a lot of discussions around artificial intelligence. We hired an AI consultant not an AI consultant with a lot of, with main focus in terms of technical background. We wanted to create internal reflections within the team. So we started discussing what were the possible options to integrate artificial intelligence. The integration that we have right now in the stable version, it's not the end of the AI integration. The idea is, again, to integrate AI into the errors explanation, but we wanted to build a small case, a pilot, to collect feedback from people and then improve the AI integration. Discussions around AI, for instance. Again, we interviewed activists and journalists, so for them it was super critical to maintain and keep privacy of their data. So a lot of the discussions were around, hey, I don't want to share if I know that the ODE will share my data with a third party, I won't use the tool to detect errors in my tables. So one of the things that we agree for this pilot is that we would have we wanted to keep control on the AI integration and let the user know what was happening on the background. So basically, whenever people upload ingest data in the ODE and they click on AI, they will see this message. If you proceed, the Open Data Editor will only share the names of your columns in your table to suggest improvements to the titles and descriptions. We wanted to make sure that we were being transparent with people, saying, hey, we are not sharing the whole data of your table, just the names of your columns, to suggest better names and better descriptions for your columns. And people have, again, we are creating intermediate actions, because here they have to click to confirm the action or cancel not to proceed with the action. We know that here, again, we have 2 clicks, but for us, it was important that people agree to continue in the process of sharing the column names with the third party. Then people have to paste the OpenAI key. And we added also, again, to make the AI integration transparent, not only this part because we found that for people it was super difficult to find the OpenAI key. So basically, we wanted to guide them to find the OpenAI key. So we link to the documentation, but we also give people the possibility to read the terms and conditions of sharing when people share their data with OpenAI. So with these 2 sentences, again, we want to create more transparency about the AI integration. And again, people have to confirm or to cancel. And then the AI assistant provides better descriptions for columns and better descriptions, names and better descriptions for the table. So the idea is to collect feedback on this, what is working, what is not working. We want to also work on structuring responses, because we detected that, for instance, when someone uploads a table in Spanish or in Portuguese, the artificial intelligence usually give a response in English. So we want to customize this a little bit, and then again, talk to the community, see what is working, what is not working, to move to where we want really to integrate artificial intelligence, which is the errors explanation. Then you will see that the look and feel here, the UI is different, but we are going to implement changes also on the metadata panel. Comments regarding this, I have been checking the GitHub repository for the last couple of days since we made the release of the new version of the Open Data Editor. metadata is super important for technical communities, and we know that we need to educate non-technical users to to make them realize the importance of this feature. But in one of the users' research sessions that we had, I remember that one person said, hey, when we asked them, what do you think metadata is? This person said, for me, is do not touch, you're going to break something in the application. So what I mean by this is that for non-technical users, metadata and these categories are non-transparent for them. So one of the things of the ideas of the Open Knowledge Foundation next year is to work on how to make this more digestible for people, and also see how we can improve the terms and the language that we use in this part of the application. For instance, one of the things that people mention is that we have one category in the schema that is called fields. We all understand that fields are the column names. So one user told us, why aren't you naming that columns? For me, it would be easier to understand what kind of data the ODE adds there. So again, these looks like very small changes, but they really make the difference when talking to non-technical audiences. And then the other thing that I wanted to mention is that we also work on the user guide. We try to build documentation more process-oriented, in the sense that, okay, this is how the steps you need to follow to download the app. This is how you upload data. This is how you make changes to your data, etc. So it's more process-oriented. And we are also going to have a cup today and tomorrow documentation review sessions, also to get feedback and collect feedback with the documentation. But one of the main things that we found, again, talking to people, is that we all know people do not read user guides in general, so the application needs to be super intuitive for non-technical users. And the other thing is that right now, in terms of communications, we also need to make some improvements, because the new version of the Open Data Editor lives on GitHub. But when people, non-technical users, click on releases and go to GitHub, for them it's like, where I'm now located. I mean, what do I need to do to download the app? So basically, the idea is to improve the documentation in terms of the how to download and install the app by adding short videos to explain users how to download the Open Data Editor. Challenges, I will repeat some of the things that I have already mentioned, but people struggle a lot when testing the application in terms of dates formats. Some people reported that they were uploading Excel files and then with a specific columns with dates, and then the ODE did not detect those columns as date, but as strings. So again, this is connected to how Frictionless work and with good practices, but people expect a different thing. And the idea is, again, not to change Frictionless, but also to think about how we are going to educate users so that they are more conscious about the standards and the good practices around formats and data in general. Sorry?
Oh, no, someone just unmuted themselves. Go ahead.
Okay. And then again, some of the things that I mentioned with the user guide, it is, I mean, we can have the best user guide in the world and use best practices, but probably people will scan documentation or only go to documentation whenever they have a problem and not before using the app. So the process is the other way around. They use the app. If they have problems, they go to the documentation. So that's why we need to not only, again, improve user guide, but also work on make the ODE transparent to users in terms of the functionality. This is also something that I explained before, but basically during all our user testing sessions, when we collected feedback about these dots that we thought they were working great, because we were like, okay, if your file is green, then you have no errors in your table. No one noticed the dots. So to try to make that transparent to user, the errors report with the error counter is now working, because we tested it with different people, and basically they understand that when they have a number next to the errors button, their file is problematic. So what I mean by this is that it's good not to make assumptions, because we assume that this was super clear. And when we start talking to users, they were like, no, I do not understand that. Because also we didn't ask specifically about errors. We asked them, what do you think the red dot or the green dot is? And they couldn't explain their functionality. So that's another thing. And I think that's it. And one more thing that I wanted to mention, probably the most complicated part for us during the process, is that from my point of view, and also from Gergana's, and I think from Patricio, we had to go to Frictionless and read Frictionless and all the documentation and try to emulate a technical person to translate the terms and the complexity of Frictionless to non-technical users. And the most, again, complex part was to reproduce the errors that the ODE detect using Frictionless, because we had to understand how Frictionless was reading files to then, like, again, remove that technical part of Frictionless and go to non-technical audiences. So if you ask me, we still have a lot of work to do. But at the same time, I think the good thing about this is that we are kind of intermediaries between Frictionless community and the ODE community. And I don't think people need to understand how Frictionless work. I think ODE needs to be super transparent for users. And again, like take Frictionless as an excuse to check tables for people and detect errors. And for next year, one big question mark is that some people mention, because the ODE right now has a couple of editing functionalities, just 2 or 3, no more. But we notice that when people see edit functions, they want to see more editing functions. So then you need to start making a decision. Okay, are you going to be Excel? No, we don't want to be Excel. Are you going to be Google Spreadsheet? No, we don't want to be Google Sheets. So one person suggested, for instance, that the ODE should be a read-only tool where people can ingest their data. The tool can let them know about all the errors that are located in the file, and that's it. And then people can clean their data in other softwares, because that's also important. I mean, we cannot, although we know that Excel has a lot of problems, Google Sheets too, in terms of format, people use these tools. So it's super difficult to change their minds. And we have a huge journey in terms of educating people. So we are discussing this kind of things, and we want your feedback also for the tool. And also I'd like to hear the Frictionless thought on how the ODE looks like now. And that's it, I think. Sarah, over to you.
Thank you, Romy. That was great. Thank you very, very much. I really enjoyed the presentation, and I put also the blog that Romina wrote for the release today. So maybe we can open the floor to discussion. Steve, I see that you already have your hands. Why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, one hand is clapping and the other hand is raised. Romy, that was a really informative presentation. Answered a lot of questions because you got behind the decision making for features and things you weren't going to do. And I'm sure people have a lot of other questions, but since I'm working on a similar project, I found that people were very quick to say, I don't want to share my information with AI, before they really understood what that meant. And especially if they're like curating, in my sense, for me, it's climate data, so it's all public domain anyway, and they still have that same reaction. I don't want to share with AI. And I'm trying to figure out if the people that you're working with really do have sensitive data and really do understand if there is a risk at all.
Great question. Yes, so we interviewed a couple of journalists, and one of them said, maybe this is like almost an exact quote, but something like, I would only share my data only if my data is public. If I'm using government data, that it's in an open data portal. But I know they use my data not only to train algorithms, but I could also be exposing sources or information that it's super sensitive. So I don't want to use AI to work on my data. And the other thing is that some journalists and activists mentioned that they use AI, of course, not for data analysis, because we all know all the problems that implies, but to do verifications on the analysis they did, but not to like enter into the data and start like seeing the whole content of the information. So that was a huge red flag for us, not only because journalists mentioned this, again, people from NGOs, or maybe they are working with internal reports from their organizations, I mean, apart from the journalism practice, and they do not want to, I mean, they have, I don't know, confidentiality clauses on the information, so they know that when that information is shared, there's a risk. So, I mean, again, regarding one, to answer also the question about OpenAI, we also had a lot of conversations about using OpenAI or not, and the idea is to move to open source LLMs. But this integration was in the original application, so it was easier also for the pilot, and also to understand first, I mean, to collect feedback and work on open source LLMs before like moving from OpenAI to open source LLMs, because it was also a lot of work. It implies a lot of technical work and research work. So that is also one of the things that I wanted to mention, that maybe if you ask us, there are things that we have done different, but you also need to consider in projects like this time constraints, to solve issues to users, and again, to like stop building the product in a specific parts of the process to get feedback from users. For instance, we knew that the pre-release was not an stable version, because of course it was not the release of December. But we say, hey, we know we have a lot of problems. Talk to us and let us know what is not working, so we can prioritize the work and get to a better stable version. And one last thing, that takes time. And for organizations, it's time that sometimes, I mean, not in Open Knowledge, but other organizations, it's time that it's not, it seems like people are not working. But if you want to really build a data product that solves issues to people, you need to talk to people. You cannot build this up in garage. And that is something also one of the learnings that we have from this work.
And if I may add also something, I think also the iterative work is really helpful. So something that you mentioned, Steve, for example, skepticism of people, sharing data with the AI. This is something that we even saw before putting the AI there. So in Frictionless, we had the first iteration of an application, which was a cloud-based application called Good Tables. Maybe some of you remember it. And people were skeptical even of just uploading, their data on the cloud. So I think it's kind of like something that is really, really deep. But that was a learning point for us. And that's why, for example, for Open Data Editor, we decided to do a desktop application instead. Anyhow, Nick, I saw that you also have your hand raised.
Yeah, Romy, sorry, I joined a little late, but I really enjoyed your presentation, and I have already downloaded the tool. I look forward to evaluating that. My question is, next year we're planning on writing explainers to people on climate change related topics. And our thought was to write a non-technical version and a technical version, and then to let the users decide which flavor they wanted or both. And it was a way of grappling with this, sometimes you really need to explain very complicated thoughts, on metadata or standards or, satellite imagery or whatever. But at the same time, there's a lot of people just need to know that that thing exists and the basic details about it. And then that may be a starting point to learn more about those things. So I guess my question is, Frictionless is part of our toolkit, and that would be as an example topic that we cover. But did you look into ways of having the user select which level of detail they want inside the user interface? And there's like a sliding scale where you go from like, just give me the Cole's notes to the, I want to know every gory detail and send me a link to the GitHub project. Is that the kind of stuff you looked into?
Yes, great question. So basically, Pato is in America Abierta right now, and he messaged me and he was like, hey, people really want to work with the metadata. And especially, technical people, because they want their files to be good to start working on. So one of the things we discuss is and also one more thing, we ask people, if it's not metadata, how would you name that bottom? And for them, it was super complex to answer that question. No one said, hey, you should name it like this. So one of the things that we are thinking about is to change the metadata bottom for an advanced bottom. And people, when they read advanced, they know that is not for them if you're not a non-technical user. But again, trying to make a couple of changes in terms of the terms of the metadata to also push people with no technical skills and train them to use the metadata. I don't know, for instance, in this part of the metadata that we are improving right now, we noticed that for users, almost all categories were, I don't know what to do with this, except from fields, I mean, column names. So we are moving the column names category to the top of the metadata to force them in a good way to work with that specific category of their data, because they know that they can change the names of columns and they can change the data format. Another possibility, for instance, is to move some categories of the metadata to other menus of the ODE. For instance, if you click next to the column name, there's a sort functionality, and people can again explore the data in different ways. So one of the ideas is also to rename column there, so that people do not notice they are working with the metadata, but also make technical people their work easier. We don't have again, we didn't make any decision yet, but we know that we don't want to be, I mean, that the educational component is something key for next year, because the idea is not to remove what they do not understand, is to make them use this to make everyone's work easier.
Yeah, the challenge we're working with an open source climate community, and the challenge we're having is we're trying to define standards for financial assets. Nobody agrees on what an asset type in a class is. There's multiple standards for what an industry is by different governments all over the world and private sectors. These are just small examples, but we simultaneously have to make it simple for people to make good decisions, but also give them a pathway to the technical detail, because if you hide all of that from them, then ultimately there's a total disconnect and you're going to make some mistakes and lose some information, but you don't want to overwhelm them with this crazy stuff either. So it's a real struggle to communicate. And this is the first time I've ever heard anybody talk about that mapping that you did, working backwards from the technology to the technical details which are needed to the end user. And I found that very interesting. So thank you.
You're welcome. And one more thing. So another conversation is the metadata part has in different categories a lot of fields. So one of the discussions that we're having right now is, okay, if you have a lot of fields, probably people won't spend time because they feel overwhelmed. No, I mean, I have 10 fields. I don't want to fill in information here. So one of the ideas is only to turn on key categories. So to make people at least fill those categories. And also one of the things that I mean, in terms of what you mentioned, maybe you can use some plain language at the front end of the application or the tool that you're building, and in the back end, keep the technical term. I mean, it's like, okay, your database will have the information you need, but the user will see other information. So they will feel more encouraged to work on that.
We are doing that. So we have a standard that we're setting for database schema, and we actually have a frictionless version of that. And we have a name full, name short, description full, description short. And you can decide what goes in what, and it's translatable. But basically, it was intended to allow you to link off to this information. Anyway, I don't want to bog down the conversation on that, but thank you so much for your insights, and I'm looking forward to working with the tool.
Thank you. Thank you.
Phil, you're up next.
Okay, really, really wonderful, actually. I have one comment and two questions. The comment is I would strongly agree with the idea that this tool not permit people to edit data. Metadata, yes, but not data. That strikes me as just a complete, for one, a bunch of reasons why in many cases you don't want people doing that. But then two, it just seems like a very different, I mean, just in terms of management of the software, it seems like a completely different consideration. But I will say for the metadata, one of the things that we see, one of the areas I work in and one of the places we're keen actually to use this tool is for NIH-funded investigators who basically now need to package their data together and put them in a generalist repository and have absolutely no idea how to do that. And this would be an absolutely perfect tool for them to work with. One of the things that we see people stumbling over all the time is just editing metadata, right? I mean, a technical user will say, oh, just open up the JSON file in your IDE and it'll be simple to do. And they have absolutely no idea what any of that means. So the two questions, the first question I have is, one of the things which we see a lot, so we've built some utilities that allow people who manage their data in systems like SAS or Stata, where they're allowed to annotate their data quite a bit. We've built some utilities that allow them to generate frictionless resources directly from those. And so when they're putting together a package, what they often have is a few data resources, so perhaps a schema and a CSV file that they've generated from files like that, but then they may have some ancillary, some additional data they want to include, which may be a completely separate CSV file. And so one question I have is, how could you imagine your tool working when a person doesn't start with an empty folder and just some CSV files, but actually wants to take a partial package and then open it up inside of your editor and add other things to it? And then the second question, and you don't have to answer these now, but the second question is, we also make use of the extensibility of the frictionless schemas to add sort of project-specific metadata. And I'm wondering if a person were to start from a schema file they've already created or that they had existing, would it be possible in the future for them to use your editor to actually edit not only the standard frictionless properties, but some of those additional custom properties?
Complex questions with complex answers. The first one, we are not at that point yet. That's the simplest answer, because we have a lot of work to do with the application in terms of improving and make people understand the metadata before going to that specific point. I mean, again, it's we don't want to make like fast jumps and say, okay, we are going to elevate the abstraction of the metadata for users, because we know we will fail. And this, I think you mentioned this relational part of working with one specific part of, I mean, one file and metadata, and then create a relationship with other files, something like that. That is super complex for people. I mean, we already, I mean, I know you know this, you all know this, but in some of the conversations that we have with people, non-technical users do not know how to build good tables. So it's like we need to like start educating people from scratch. I mean, some of the people working in the pilots ingested, for you to know, tables with merged cells, with clarifications on data. I mean, again, adding methodological part into the cells. So we think we are not at that point of getting into more advanced use of the metadata. Although what I can say again, and I think this also answers question 2, is that most of the tickets that we're having right now after the stable release are connected to people who wants to use the ODE to upload their schema or data package and do something with the data package, and not to use the tool with non-technical people. So again, the big question here is, how do we get into an intermediate point where the ODE is a tool that enters into the regular workflow, facilitate your work as a technical person, but also facilitate the work of non-technical users. So again, we think metadata is important, but we are not at that point of thinking about all the questions that you asked me in terms of that would be for, I don't know, 2026. We have still a lot of work to do. I don't know if I answered to your question, but basically what I'm saying is that it's something that we need to think about, but we need to do other stuff before going into those points.
No, you absolutely did. Thank you very much.
Done.
This is kind of on the similar lines. I'm just trying to think, how would you, like for someone that's using this as part of a project that isn't using Frictionless as it's sort of its primary, you know, I don't know, format for metadata or packages, could, you know, do you see that, I guess the users you were talking to would they be using this as part of workflow that already is sort of bought into Frictionless? Or if not, like how would they sort of integrate this? You know, if they output a Frictionless resource, how would they think about moving that along to the next part of the pipeline, that whatever it is?
I think we're all in our minds for 2025. So with Pato, we have been exploring adult toolkits, apart from Frictionless, because we also saw similar tools with, again, different frameworks and validation rules. So in the future, what we would like to know is to let the user select the type of validation rules that they want to apply to their files. Because right now, again, we have the validations rules from Frictionless. And I think we have, in terms of errors that the application detects, 10 errors in total. But we also discover other tools that allow people to detect other types of errors. And again, why we started talking about this, because during the pilot, some people mentioned, hey, I would expect the ODE to detect this. And it's not reading the file as I would read it in terms of checking the file. So that is one of the ideas, to integrate different plugins and allow people to select how they want their file to be checked. And the other thing that I wanted to mention is, and that we found problems with Frictionless, is that when the user uploads the files into Frictionless read it, but also interpret, this from the technical point of view, but it interprets the data, basically. So in some cases, for instance, if you, I don't know, change data in cell A1, maybe the whole row went up, and then all the column names were removed. So one of the things we are trying right now for next year is to add a kind of code that allows the ODE to just describe the file as it was ingested and not do interpretations, and then applies the validation rules. Because again, we didn't notice this at the beginning, but when someone sent us a file in which this problem happened, we discovered that we had a problem with data integrity, basically, because some data was removed. So again, as soon as we started exploring Frictionless rules and also checking errors in tables, we started detecting other contextual problems connected to how files were read. So to answer to your question, the idea is to allow people to integrate different plugins and to select what they want to for the data.
If I could, real quick, that was all incredibly interesting, but I don't think exactly what I was asking.
I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. I probably wasn't clear, but I was more thinking maybe this is just more of a frictionless question in general, but you said that a goal of the application is to sort of guide people to writing better metadata. But the metadata is, I understand why, because we're wrestling with this exact same problem on my project, the idea of sort of abstracting metadata and letting people sort of use any schema they want. I know that's very hard from firsthand experience, but given that that's not an option, what are these sort of less technical people doing with these frictionless resources once they're done with the process? Are they just part of projects that already kind of expect frictionless style metadata, or are they reformatting it for other metadata standards? I'm just kind of curious how your audience is using the metadata that it outputs.
Okay, let me see if I understood right now. So basically, the problem is that people do not touch the metadata. They don't touch it. They think that's, once they click the button, and we discovered this in all the sessions, they were like, no, this is too complex for me. I will just concentrate on the table. And by doing that, again, we detected we had a problem. So let me know if I answer correctly right now. But basically, what we are asking is something that non-technical users are not getting into yet. And we decided to keep the metadata button because we were like, okay, this is important. This is the heart of Frictionless. And we want to educate people in the future with this, but people do not touch that button.
I see what you're saying. You basically sort of deprioritized
Yes.
metadata generally for now because it's not what people are. Okay, that makes sense.
Any other questions?
I have one. It's probably right in the doc, so I'm sorry if this is me being lazy, but how well is it scaling right now for like larger CSVs, say? Like how well is it handling 100 megs, a gig, that kind of thing?
Also good question. One of the problems that we have at the end of our pilots. So in the original version of the ODE, basically when you ingested large files, the ODE said loading, 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 and that's it. Right now, what we added is, I think, 1 or 2 sentences to let the user know that their file is large, and they need to wait a couple of minutes until the application ingests the data in full. Because we work with 2 organizations for the pilot of the ODE, and one was, in their daily work, they use data from the national budget. So imagine those files, basically. So the first thing that they did was to start uploading information from the government, and they were like, no, it is not working, and we spent like 5 minutes ingesting this, and nothing happened. So we added a kind of message saying, hey, the ODE is reading your file. It may take a couple of minutes. Please wait. That's all we can do for now.
I saw, Nick, that you have your hand raised, but I also wanted to flag that Jeanette was trying the application live, and she just opened a 2 GB file, which is quite awesome. I don't know if, Jeanette, you want to say something about it?
Yeah, I guess just, it didn't seem to have a problem with that one. We work with a lot of multi-gig files, so this is really nice.
Wonderful. Thank you for trying it out live.
I think waiting is fine, but it's not crashing and that you don't know it's not crashing is like a big improvement on Excel, say, which is what we always get people. I loaded the file in Excel, my computer crashed. What's wrong with the file?
Yeah, so I'm also trying it live. So first of all, first impressions, it's amazing communication and user experience, super streamlined. I love it. I did load one of my existing CSV files, and I have an existing frictionless schema. Is there a way that I can associate those things? I know that we're trying to make this super simple, but am I missing something?
Not now. I mean, one of the things, for instance, you won't file your JSON file in the ODE, in the current version. The idea is to, and this is an issue that we have for the ESA sprint, we will incorporate the bottom to allow people to download the metadata directly, their schema from the application. So right now, I mean, you can download data and also like upload your metadata. It's like just, we keep the same feature as it was in the original version.
Yeah,
but we hope you
sorry.
can do that in the future.
Yeah, and I apologize. I showed up late, so you probably explained all this several times. But anyway, it looks amazing and well done.
Thank you.
We have time for one last question, if anyone has anything, or just a final comment. If there's nothing, I would definitely encourage. Oh, go ahead.
Does it still publish to CCAN, or have you stripped that out?
Yes, but CCAN, we talk with Pato, only the versions that are not customized. I mean, CCAN, the most basic version. And it also works, yes, with GitHub and Zenodo. Yeah, and yes, the idea is to work on those features next year. Can I add one more thing in general? Okay, I think we still have a lot of work to do with the Open Data Editor, but one of the most amazing things about the project is that, the diversity of the team, again, in terms of skills, but also this, that I think 90% of the projects are about having good communication, not only internally, but also with users. And if I have to say, probably 90% of the application users are responsible for what we have done. People like gave us valuable time to give us insights on explaining how they work. But people usually building apps or tools, they do not ask questions to people. So basically, there are a lot of assumptions when we start projects. In fact, I mean, I'm a non-technical person, and I assume a lot of things when I started the project. And then it's very difficult when someone says, hey, this is not working. Okay, and then you have another user saying this is not working, and you have to create that distance and be humble in terms of the team to build an app that really solves problems for people.
Thank you, Romy. I would definitely encourage you to continue using Open Data Editor, and if you see something or you want to, raise a concern or anything, you can open an issue or you can just reach out to us. If there's nothing else, there's just a couple of announcements that I wanted to make. One is that we have started, finally, we've been talking about this for ages, Frictionless community on Zenodo. So if you are on Zenodo and you want to be part of it, reach out to me so I can add you. And then the other thing that I wanted to announce is that the next community call is going to be probably in January, since this one shifted to December. So it's going to be as usually on the last Thursday of the month, so the 30th of January. I'll send an invitation around. I think we're going to have an update from the categorical data working group on data package, but if there's anything else that you would like to present, reach out to me so we can include it. Thank you all for joining us. Thanks, Romina, for the brilliant presentation. And yeah, see you all next year.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank
you.
you.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.